There's a storm you can't see, hear, or smell, but every particle chips away at your future. We watched the red horizon and we cheered. None of the cameras showed the slow counting down happening inside our cells. I learned to read danger by sound long before I learned to read it by number. The dosimeter on my wrist would chirp in a way that made the hair stand up on my arm, a small clinical alarm that sounded nothing like the thunder you expect a storm to make. It did not announce itself with wind or color. It announced itself in clicks and in numbers that scrolled across a small green panel. The first time it spiked, we laughed nervously and called it a cosmic hiccup. By month 3, the laughter dried up. We trained for emergencies you can see, a fuel leak, a micrometeoroid strike, a torn suit. Radiation was different. It arrived as a tally, as invisible punctuation in our lives. The dosimetry logs, rows and rows of digits, became a new kind of journal. It told us how many millisieverts we had accumulated since launch. The engineers always tried to make those numbers feel manageable. We designed the shielding for Mission X, they said, and the worst-case events are within tolerance. Those phrases are comforting if you put your faith in a spreadsheet. They are less comforting when your dosimeter reads numbers that start to add up in the low thousands over the course of a mission that lasts years. Context matters. A chest CT at home might be measured in single-digit millisieverts. A full-body exposure over months in deep space stacks up. Out here, the baseline cosmic background climbs. Solar particle events can dump a sudden high dose in hours. Galactic cosmic rays are a different animal, high energy, relentless, and small enough to sneak through most barriers. When you hear talk of hundreds or thousands of millisieverts, it begins to mean something you can feel in the language of risk. Cancer probability ticks upward. Arteries begin to show the first immature signs of calcification. Brain networks that manage memory and executive function pick up microscopic scars. We tried every countermeasure we could. We wrapped our living modules in layered materials, aluminum, polyethylene, specialized polymers, stuff calculated to slow down particles or soak up secondary cascades. We buried parts of the habitat under regolith for extra mass. Engineers joked about wearing lead aprons like dentists, but lead is not the universal shield people imagine. High-energy particles striking heavy shielding produce secondaries, neutrons, and secondary photons that can be as damaging as the primary wave. In other words, thick armor can be its own enemy. You stop some bullets and you create a spray of shrapnel nobody warned you about in the press release. The irony is cruel. Adding mass sometimes increases the dose to sensitive tissues. The problem is one of interaction physics. A particle hits a metal lattice and, depending on energy, knocks loose other particles that go wandering.
Some materials moderate particles well, others do poorly. We spent long nights in engineering briefings with graphs and charts and colorful Monte Carlo simulations. They comforted us with error bars and probabilities, but probabilities are not consolation when the risk is not theoretical, it is written into the marrow of your bones. Radiation does its damage at the smallest scales, and because it is so sneaky, it gives you little time to protest. DNA strands bear the scars, double-strand breaks that the cell must either fix or misrepair. Misrepair becomes mutation, mutation becomes a seed. In some of us, the immune system wore down as bone marrow took hits. White cell counts fluctuated in ways that worried the medical team. We began to treat minor infections like major events because our body's first responders were getting their orders from a damaged factory. The brain was the scariest ledger. We ran cognitive batteries daily, simple tasks at first, then complex ones that measured executive function, memory recall, reaction time. At baseline, we were all bright, decisive, the type of people who could thread a precise instrument through a narrow window at 2 in the morning. Over time, the battery showed subtle declines. Reaction times extended by a fraction of a second. Errors crept into checklists that had never had errors. We judged ourselves harshly at first: tired, sleep cycle disruption, monotony. But when the declines correlated with dosimeter excursions, when the same patterns repeated across crew members in different roles, it became clear that this was not just fatigue. There is a particular terror to losing clarity when you are the person who must keep things safe. I remember an EVA when I misread a pressure gauge by a small margin. It almost cost us a suit. Later, we ran the numbers and mapped the moment to a recent spike in cosmic activity. We do not like to tell the public these stories because they are not tidy narratives. They do not end with a single hero saving everyone. They end with a slow accumulation of risk that changes who we are. Cancer risk is a spectral fear that lives in the future tense. Radiation raises the odds in charts, incremental, statistical, and in those charts we read the names of diseases like a grim prophecy. We had crew members who underwent repeated scans, blood panels that found odd anomalies, micronuclei in cells, markers of inflammation that would have been shrugged off on Earth. Here, they loomed. The med team spoke in percentages, in excess risks over a lifetime. It sounded abstract until the day someone on our crew had a biopsy that was borderline. We treated it with the urgency of people who understand that borderline can become definitive with another nudge from particles. We tried pharmacological counters, antioxidants, medications designed to mop up free radicals, compounds intended to protect DNA replication. Some interventions felt promising in lab mice and in vitro assays, but living, breathing humans are less tidy.
Drugs had side effects, and when you trade one set of risks for another, you are still making a bet on the future. Nutritional protocols helped a little. We forced down foods rich in precursors for repair pathways. None of it was a shield. There is also the politics of this threat. Mission timelines are driven by budgets, by launch windows, by national narratives. Scientific caution can be overruled by deadlines. We had moments where leadership in conference rooms argued for pushing forward. We can manage it, they said, while the med team made bloodless charts showing cumulative dose versus observed cognitive decline. Tension made a new kind of silent currency in our lives. Trust that the people at the console knew what was being wagered. Solar particle events are dramatic and terrifying for different reasons. Forecasting helps. We have sensors that warn of flares that will dump a heavy short-term dose. Those are the moments we bunker down in the storm shelter. Thick walls, fewer windows, every human folded into a smaller, mass-shielded space. Those days we felt the claustrophobia of the safe room and the helplessness of being at the mercy of a star. But even the shelter is a compromise. It reduces, it dampens, it cannot fully erase the assault. And between flares, the slow tide of galactic cosmic radiation keeps its steady table. When the mission planners eventually convened to model the long-term outcomes, they did it with hesitant voices. They projected an increase in lifetime cancer risk by a non-trivial amount. They projected accelerated atherosclerosis in some crew members. They projected cognitive decline that could impair mission-critical decision-making. They insisted these were managed risks. They insisted the knowledge gained was priceless. We had to decide as humans whether to accept those odds for the sake of a future we could barely imagine. We signed forms, we recorded messages, we told our loved ones that we loved them in ways that sounded too deliberate, like recitations. There were, of course, moments of wonder, the view of dust devils at dawn, the electric thinness of a Martian sunrise. We were not numb, we were awake to beauty, but we carried with us the knowledge that each beautiful day added to the tab on our cellular ledger. What stays with me most are the small human reckonings.
A crewmate who used to sketch landscapes in the mess ceased to produce the same intricate lines. He complained of fogginess that could not be washed away by sleep. Another took to recording her daughter's voice and playing it back to study memory recall tests with a stubborn, professional quiet. We made jokes that were thin and brittle because humor is how underfunded souls survive. We argued with engineers about material science as if we could bargain with reality. If you ask what survivors pay, do not imagine dramatic explosions or cinematic sacrifice. Imagine instead a life where the future is probabilistic in ways you did not consent to, where children you might have had are a question mark.
Where the baseline of your health shifts, where every day includes a small counting of a hidden score. Imagine telling your sister not to worry as you privately scroll the dosimeter and see it creeping upward like a tide. I do not tell this for pity. I tell it because we are the subjects of an experiment written in our cells. We are the first cohort to experience a sustained, multi-year exposure outside the magnetosphere at scale. The data we collect, blood markers, cognitive batteries, tissue samples, will inform whether the next group goes with better shields, different habitats, or the hard decision to delay until technology catches up. There is dignity in that data. There is also cost. Tonight, I press my palm to the small green panel on my wrist. The number blinks. It will blink and climb again tomorrow. In the dim light of the habitat, we read each other like weather reports. I keep a file of home on a drive, photos of rain, recordings of a subway station, the smell of coffee in memory. When I fold that file and tuck it away, I say a thanks for the little things, for gravity enough to hold a cup, for a planet with a magnetic field that sighs in protection, for the invisible armor Earth gives us without asking. If you ever stand in sunshine and think that Earth is merely a backdrop, remember that it is an active shield. Remember that the storm I describe is not made of wind, but of particles that carve their signatures into us. Hug someone. Walk without counting your steps. Let your bones bear their small necessary work. We carried the price of wonder into a place that asked for more than we could safely give. We did it because curiosity drove us, but knowing the cost is part of honoring the sacrifice.